So I want to tell you a quick little story. It's actually, it's quick, but I tell it a long way. So, I'll tell you a story of two steamboats. Okay, how many of you guys know what a steamboat is? Okay, it's a boat that back in the day they used that was operated on coal. So there's two steamboats heading down the Mississippi River, and their destination is New Orleans, and they're both carrying cargo. And obviously the Mississippi's a big river, so it's not like they're right next to each other, but they're traveling. And eventually sailors from one boat start jawing with sailors from the other boat. And they start saying, "You were moving so slow, blah, blah, blah." So as you can imagine, a couple of boats filled with a bunch of dudes, a race ensues. And a competition turns into it. So they start loading more coal into their steamboat, and they start loading more and more and more in, and the boats start cruising. Well, these boats load up a certain amount of coal for the distance of their trip. So the faster you go, the more coal you're using. So as you can imagine, one of the boats started slowing down because they were running out of coal. So they started getting a little distance between them and the other boat. Then one sailor had the bright idea. Wait, we have something else that can burn on this boat that we could use instead of coal. All the cargo that we're supposed to bring down to New Orleans. So the sailor gets the bright idea, and they start loading in the cargo. And once you know, that puppy started cruising. And that boat eventually wins the race. But here's the deal. They get to their destination, and what are they missing? Their cargo. They show up like, "We won the race, let's go, we won the race." And then the person's like, "So where's my shipment?" And they're like, "Oh, well, we won the race, so let's go." So I tell you that story because I wonder, how often do we do something like that in our lives? How often do we have a priority? We have our main goal, bring cargo to our destination. But something all of a sudden takes priority over that. The secondary or the third most important goal, the race, all of a sudden takes priority. They're no longer worried about delivering their cargo to the person that they promised. They are just worried about winning the race. I think we do that in our lives quite a bit. If you've been with us, we're in this series called Godspace with this very neat picture. And we've talked about the heart, we've talked about noticing, we've talked about serving, listening, and tonight we are talking about wondering. Talking about wondering, or the ability to ask good, powerful questions that will lead into natural, organic, spiritual conversations. And I think this is very, very, very important in high school. We're going to talk about this idea to start conversations, spiritual conversations, with that person in your classroom, that person at your school, who you're like, we could never have a good conversation. I am nothing like them. They are nothing like me. We're hoping to rewrite that script today, or we've been hoping to rewrite that script in this series. Because I think if you were to ask a lot of Christians, okay, maybe yourself, if you say, "Hey, why are you a Christian?" that person might be able to say, "Well, you know what? There was just this conversation I had with somebody, and it was so great. They let me ask questions. We asked questions together. We sat and we just answered some really big questions together, and it was great." But on the other end, you have that friend that won't even say the word church, or you invite them to church and they run away, or they don't like to do anything that even could involve the idea of church. If you were to actually get in a conversation with them and say, "Why don't you want to have anything to do with church?" That person might look at you and say, "Well, I think I can trust you, so I'll tell you, I once had this conversation with somebody that I thought was my friend. They called themselves a Christian, and we noticed that we had different views. And they just wanted to make sure, without a doubt, that I knew I was wrong. They wanted to make sure that I knew that they were right. Essentially, they just wanted to win the race. They were okay with burning all of the cargo just to win the race." So this idea of wondering, asking good questions, is very, very powerful. Because here's the deal. When done correctly, when done effectively, when done genuinely, the cool thing is with wondering, you actually can help somebody move along in their curiosity of Christianity. There might be somebody you could call level 1, and as you're wondering with them, they might be willing and okay with moving on to that next level of curiosity. The cool thing about questions, it was very, very, very effective in Jesus' ministry. Raise your hand if you want to guess how many questions of Jesus are recorded in the Gospels. How many questions are recorded? Raise your hand if you want. Guess. Come on, the worst thing you can do is be wrong. Yes.
More than 2.
More than 2, okay. Can we get better?
That's my boy.
What? Yes. 32. Closer. Grayson. Wrong. Super wrong. Caden?
All of them.
Okay, good. I knew that was going to be a sarcastic answer. So, you guys are close. I think if you add them all together and then multiply them by 2, you're actually close to the answer. 339 questions are recorded in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, questions that Jesus asked. So questions were very, very important in Jesus' ministry. And again, the cool thing is I said that our questions can plant seeds in people's mind for the future. So we're going to kind of get into what wondering is, what wondering isn't, but I want to start you off with this. Okay, before we're going to get into having conversations with other people, we need to start with us. So this isn't a point on your notes, but if you find some space, you can write it if you want. The first point is to allow yourself to wonder, or how I would even be okay with saying it is, be okay with wondering. Be okay with asking yourself the tough questions. Be okay with asking yourself questions that you don't know the answer to, but I'd encourage you to not stop there. Okay? Ask yourself a question you don't know the answer to, and then just don't stop and be like, okay, well, I don't know. Because here's my problem. I find myself personally, I don't know if you guys are like this, maybe I'm just the only sinner here, but I have like a box, and I found this box to be actually very small. It's not a real box, it's a metaphorical box, I guess you could say, of topics, questions, things regarding Jesus that I feel comfortable talking about. Right? Things that I'm like, all right, I either have a really good answer to that question, or I have something that could look like an answer that will at least get me out of the question. I have my little box here. You ask me a question about something in there, boom, let's have ourselves a conversation. But you ask me one of those edgy, risky questions, right? And I'm like, and I start getting uncomfortable. And I think we all have that box. Like, hey, what's it mean to be a Christian? Boom, I know that one. Like, who died on the cross? Boom, I know that one. Hey, Tim, like, how do I love so-and-so when they're doing this in their life, and that's wrong, but they're really... So you start asking those questions, that's going to get a little harder for us to answer if we are staying inside that box. So I encourage you, allow yourself to wander, allow yourself to be a little risky and ask those questions. In Matthew 7, Jesus encourages us to do something very similar. Matthew 7, verses 7 and 8, it says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened. For everyone who asks receives, he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. So again, I want to encourage us to ask ourselves the tough questions. And we're going to look at this, the art of asking good questions. And also, what's interesting about this is that there's a good chance that in these conversations that we're going to be in these conversations with people of completely different lifestyles or very different ways of thinking. Somebody who doesn't think like you, they don't understand like you, they don't come to conclusions like you do, and vice versa. So there's a good chance that the people that we're talking to are of very different points of views, very different lifestyles, and that is 100% okay. That means that you're at least moving in the direction of what effective Godspace would look like. Our goal in these conversations is to make the listener feel loved, heard, and safe. So I want to ask you, why would I include the word safe in there? When I'm saying, all right, talking to people in spiritual conversations, you want them to feel loved, that one makes sense, be like Jesus. You want them to feel heard, that makes sense. If they're heard, they're not going to, if they're not heard, they're not going to talk. But why feel safe? Why would I encourage us to have them feel safe? Crowd interaction, you guys can answer back if you want. Why would them feeling safe be important? Yes?
So they don't feel like judged.
They don't feel judged. Yes, now we're warming up.
Because God's family is supposed to be comfortable.
Okay, God's family is supposed to be comfortable. Okay, who wants to follow that one up? All right, those are both good answers. Midway had a really good answer, though. Yes. Midway's the middle school.
If they don't feel safe, they might not choose to pursue.
There we go. Good job, Grayson. That's my guy. No. All right. So top of that. Pay them to say that. No, if they feel safe, right? You can relate safety, feeling safe, to trusting you. If they don't feel safe, they are not going to open up, and they are not going to even think about trusting you. So we want them to feel heard, we want them to feel loved, we want them to feel safe. So let's get to that cool chart on your paper. I'm going to tell you kind of what wondering is, what wondering isn't, and I'm going to give you like a little life application question, something that you can ask somebody in like a real life situation. I'd encourage you to actually try to apply those to your life. After I taught this weekend, I came to situations where I'm like, oh, I could actually apply this to my life. I did, and it was neat, but it was a little scary. So, what wondering is, the top box is for you. It's a mutual desire to understand. You could even say it's a mutual desire to understand each other. It's not telling them they're wrong. Wondering is a mutual desire to understand each other, not telling them they're wrong. This takes a lot of humility on our end to be in a conversation with somebody that we disagree with and desire to understand where they're coming from. What this can show to them is that you love them and you are willing to listen to them. So many of us are just so quick to close people off if we disagree with them, but I'm encouraging you to do the exact opposite. You open the door for them to understand these spiritual conversations, but you also open the door for yourself to understand them in these conversations. I was thinking about this, and as a believer, if you are a Christian, one of your most strongest, innermost desires is going to be for somebody to know the love and the power of God. Right? Somebody to know, if I know that Ryan is not a Christian, my desire would be for him to just know the love and the power of God. Now you can ask your staff, a lot of us have been Christians for a long time, okay? 5, 10, 20, maybe 40 years. A long time. And that's something that we are all still working on. Okay, that is, you will never kind of come up to a staff and be like, oh, I have loving and the power of God 100% figured out. I have everything figured out. I have all the answers. You will never hear a staff here at CAD say that. If they do, let us know, because that's weird, right? So we can't get mad at somebody who's unwilling or unable to understand or accept that after talking to them for 20 minutes. They're like, I have tried to talk to Billy Bob for like 20 minutes and he will just not have any of it. So I'm done because he is never going to understand the love of God. We have to be patient with them and strive to understand them. We have to be prepared and prayed up in these situations. Our desire to understand them should actually be stronger than our desire for them to understand us. We should go in ready and prepared to listen to them. Because what it does is it allows their walls to come down. When they realize they don't necessarily have to be on the defense or they're not going to get attacked, but you're actually there to love them and you're there to listen to them, their walls are going to start coming down. I heard it put this way about Jesus, and it was really, really cool. It says, Jesus never asked a question just because he wanted to know the answer. Okay, Jesus never asked a question just because he wanted to prove somebody he was right. It says this, he used the question the way a surgeon would use a scalpel, to delicately cut into a new level of understanding. Right? So when he asked the question, he wasn't just waiting for the answers like this is Jeopardy. He asked the question to allow the listener, whoever's receiving the question, to have the opportunity to go deeper in their thinking. A cool question that you could ask, and again, I'm going to give you like a life application question. You apply it how you want, but I really encourage you to kind of put these in your tool belt and ask people this week, because it does work. But a question you could ask is, can you tell me more about blank? If you're in a conversation with somebody and they're sharing something with you that you don't quite understand and you're pretty sure you disagree with it, don't say you're wrong, you're stupid, stop. Say, hey, I don't quite understand that. I'm not very familiar with that. Can you tell me more about it? Because what you're actually saying is, can you tell me more about you? Like, I am legitimately interested in you. You're not telling them, hey, shut up, I don't want to listen to you. You're saying, can you tell me more about you? The really cool thing, the joy of somebody giving their life to God is actually going to come from not people being right, not Christians debating other people and them being wrong, but Christians letting God work through them, in them, and around them through understanding. And this is going to bring us to our second point of wondering, which is wondering is creating the opportunity for you to learn, not creating the opportunity for you to teach. I said it before, I said it again. Wondering and asking questions of people is going to take a lot of humility on our end as believers. Giving us the opportunity to learn, not the opportunity for you to teach. Many of you know Rachel, right? She's right here. Everyone say hi, Rachel. Okay. So Rachel is 100% fantastic at asking questions. Case in point. And I am not, and she is. So we were at the dog park a few weeks ago, and we're walking along, and there's this girl kind of sitting on the bench, just doing her own thing. I think she was smoking a cigarette, I'm not sure. She's doing her thing, and I'm following our dog. I think I've talked about Buddy before. I followed him because he was going to go do his business, and if you don't pick that up, I don't know if you guys know dog park rules, but that's like a big no-no if you don't pick up your dog's business. So I'm over there, and I'm watching him, waiting for him to do his thing, and Rachel's over talking to this girl on the park bench. And I'm like, I'm in earshot, because I'm like, all right, just let her do her thing, whatever, she's fine. And I hear Rachel say like, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Oh, hi, what's your name? Oh, well, that's a cool dog. What type of dog is he? Oh, do you live around here? What school do you go to? Oh, I see you like to read. What book do you like to read? What's your favorite subject in school? And it's just boom, 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 right? Question after question. And I'm like, Rachel, you're interrogating the girl's dog. Like, this girl's gonna grab her dog, which his name was Kush, by the way, which is weird. That was a question we didn't ask. But she's gonna grab her dog and she's gonna bail. But here's the mind blower. Okay? Rachel wasn't interrogating the girl. Rachel was learning about the girl. Rachel was trying to understand more about the girl. And this is the part that blew my mind. Okay? The questions kept coming and coming and coming and coming. And the answers kept getting longer and longer and longer and longer. Like, this girl was loving it. She was loving the questions. We were kind of joking about it. She started answering questions that weren't even asked. Like, she's like, this is an opportunity for me to talk, and I'm going to. We had enough to write a full-on book about this girl afterwards. And so, eventually I kind of entered the conversation. I was there. I was like, just awkward me. But the cool thing is that when I go to the school that this girl's at now, every time we walk by, the girl's like, what up? Like, now there's that connection there. So Rachel just did a fantastic job about learning about this girl. And again, now we just know a lot of information about her and her family. But I do think that for someone to walk up to you with genuine concern about you and your life and who you are, okay, you can say that you don't, but I think each and every one of us love that opportunity to talk about ourselves. We just don't always have somebody that's going to listen. And though I don't think you're alone in that, if you like talking about yourself but don't have someone to listen, I think we go to school with tons of people that are in the same boat. They're like, I would love to talk about myself. Just nobody will listen. Oftentimes because we're too busy, or there's a phone in the way. Right? There's often a phone in between us and the person. But what you do when you listen to somebody, to jump into that opportunity to teach, A, you learn about something that you may not know otherwise. You learn about a lifestyle or a worldview that you may not know otherwise. And you also relate to the person, I value you. I value your heart. I value what you have to say. And guys, here's the cool thing. You might be relaying this to them and they've never felt this way before, but you are worth my time. You are worth my attention. You are worth listening to. As a youth leader, I've had a lot of conversations, a lot of good conversations, a lot of bad ones. Okay? And the best conversations that I've walked away from, the one where you get the like, thanks for that, bro, like that kind of text, those conversations, I used these a lot more than I used this. Right? I listened, I sat there and I said, tell me more, a lot more than blah, 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 right? Listening is very, very powerful. So a life application question, something you can try. Any question about them that A is not invasive and B is not way too personal and weird. But any question about them. Start with the basics. How are you? What do you like to do for fun? Do you have pets? Like, just any question. And then do what Rachel did. Take the question, you get the answer, and then go off of that. Oh, you have a pet. What's your favorite pet? What's your pet's name? Why? Like, that's a fun one. Why is your pet named that? There's always a story. Like, I had a cat named Sassy when I was a kid because I loved Homeward Bound. Like, there's always a story behind pet names. No one just randomly says, that's my dog, Ken. Because, right? Like, because I want my name to be Ken. It's not, there's always a story. So what this does is this leads us to point number 3, and this, which is this. Wondering is building a relationship. It is not setting up an agenda. Right? We've all been there before. We're talking to somebody and we're like, there's something else you want to say. I actually tell my friends, I say, if I know what you're going to say before you've said it, because they kind of do the, well, you see what I wanted, like they're almost like dancing around you. I always say, hey, I'm awkward, so if I know what you're going to say before you say it, I'm either going to A, shut down, but conversation's over, it's going nowhere, or B, I'm going to try and claw at what you're saying, and I'm going to try to reveal the truth behind what you're saying, which is probably going to kill the conversation and make things really awkward, right? So, we don't want to be those that are kind of speaking with an agenda. Another Rachel story, she teaches first grade, and she has a rule with her first graders because they need lots of rules and they need lots of instructions. It's if you're going to ask a question, you know, on the carpet, on the big carpet, you just don't blurt it out because that's very ineffective. But step one, you raise your hand. Step two, you actually start your sentence with, I wonder. What that does is that tells the class that I'm about to ask a question, and it actually lets them know, hey, I'm about to ask a question. Then step three, here's the kicker, here's the tricky part. They actually have to follow it up with a question, right? Because here's what happens, and I've seen it happen in first grade. Kids, they like, I just want to talk about myself, so I'm going to take any opportunity I can. So they'll be like, teacher, yes, do you have a question? Yes. Well, how do we start? Teacher, I wonder, I just got a brand new dog, and I love my dog. It's so big I can ride on my dog, and he eats all my food, he licks my face, but my dog farts, and it's really weird. Right? So you're sitting there and you're like, was there a question? Like, I don't know. But that kid's like, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to talk about me and I want to talk about my dog. It's harmless, but that little booger had an agenda, right? He knew what he wanted to do, so he took the opportunity he had. So we as believers, in our desire to share the hope of Christ and our desire to share the love of God, if we are not loving, if we do not have any tact in what we are trying to say, it can actually feel very agenda-driven. It can actually feel like we're trapping people or that we are coercing people into what we want them to say. It's important to remember, this is kind of a weird statement, but we are building relationships as believers. We're not out there hunting, right? We're not out there like trying to target people. We don't have a checklist. Like nothing's going to put up walls faster than somebody thinking that they're just kind of a target on a checklist. My man Dr. Seuss has this quote, you guys have probably heard it before. He says, to the world, you may be one person, but to one person, you may be the world. I think this is a good thing that we kind of want people feeling as they leave conversations with us. Like, wow, I was the world in that conversation. We don't want people necessarily walking away saying like, what was that? What did I just agree to? Like, I feel scared. Like, we don't want that. What we do, this is kind of the cool part. Okay? This opportunity, we want to create a next. We want to create them excited, an opportunity for them to be excited about the next conversation. And I would say, yes, the next conversation with you. But as we are here, we're believers. Okay, you're in a room with other believers from the same school that you go to. And what a cool opportunity that let's say I go to North Valley and a kid talks to Elise, has a great conversation. Elise is just listening to him. She's Godspace them left and right. And they walk away from that conversation like, so that's what a Christian's like, huh? Well, that was super cool. Like, I felt loved, I felt all this stuff. And they walk up to me and they find out I'm a Christian. And they're like, you're a Christian? Okay, that's great. Like, I talked to another Christian, another one of your kind. That was really cool. Like, they're excited because they're associating Christian with, like, someone who cares about you, who loves you. But, unfortunately, oftentimes, or let's say they talk to me and I'm like the what not to do. And they say, you know, oh, you're a Christian, well, I'm not a Christian. I'm like, how dare you? I'm like, you need to believe what I believe. And I start throwing rocks at them. It's just a terrible experience, right? And it's weird. They didn't accept God after the conversation. Like, I don't get it. I did all the steps. But they walk away from that conversation and they're strolling. They see Elise and they're like, oh, you're a Christian? She's like, yeah. Right? Kicking her and fighting her because they're like, oh, those Christians, they're scary. And although it's not going to be like Mortal Kombat, like, that is kind of how some people, they're like, oh, no, I had one bad experience with a Christian back at my old school or whatever, and I'm never going to talk to another Christian again. So again, we are building relationships. We are not setting up an agenda. A good life application question here is not the how are you, but the follow-up, the why. This is the one I've really been trying to apply to my life. How are you? Oh, I'm good. Well, why are you good? Like, why? What makes you good? I know often, maybe you guys have done this before, it's called like the quick lobby walkthrough. Hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm okay. All right, cool. See you later. Bye. And the person's like, I told you I was okay. Like, why did you stop and, like, why did you even ask if you're not going to listen to my response? I asked this guy, I was at middle school the other day, and I did this. How are you? Why? And I was like, okay, I'm just going to keep asking questions about this. And it ended up being like this kid was sad because his friend passed away a few weeks ago. And I was like, geez, God, like that, you were, I mean, you Godspace in that moment, hardcore. Like, thank you for that. But this is a very powerful tool. How are you? Why? Moving on, to get you guys into groups here soon. Your fourth little box, what wondering is it's being ready to listen, it's not waiting to speak. Being ready to listen, not waiting to speak. Probably the toughest of the 5 boxes for me. Actually having to zip this up, and you guys know me, I'm a chatterbox, I like to talk a lot. Okay, zipping this up and actually listening. If I'm not mistaken, Brian shared this verse with you last week, James 1:19, while he was talking about listening. He says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Now, I don't want you to confuse that with like, you saying like, I can't speak, because we are actually encouraged by Scripture to be prepared with a response. 1 Peter 3:15 says, instead you must worship Christ as your Lord and Savior. If someone asks about your hope as a believer, always be ready. Some translations say, always be prepared to explain it. So again, it's not that we shouldn't talk, but it's this that we shouldn't be waiting to speak. We should be very quick to listen. I don't know if you've done this, but you've been in a conversation with somebody and they say something and you disagree with it, and boom! It triggers you, your ears stop listening, and you're writing like 10,000 reasons why they're wrong. And this is the part that like kind of blows my mind. We're actually like, okay, I want to kindly interrupt them, destroy everything they just said, and tell them they're wrong. And like we're trying to figure out how to like kindly do that. But you shut your ears off, and you're just waiting for them to like, take a breath or take a sip of their water. That way you can interject and tell them they're wrong. Maybe we don't always do that incredibly aggressively, but I know I do that in a lot of sports conversations where I have opinions, they have opinions, none of those opinions really matter, none of them are eternity-based, but we get into arguments anyway. We should be slow to speak and quick to listen. Now, take sports out of that. Let's insert like a number of hot topics that are floating around our schools, our classroom, maybe even your house. How do we respond in those situations when we have the opportunity to either jump in and be quick to speak or be quick to listen? Politics. Probably more dynamic now more than ever. Somebody says one thing, oh, I feel blank, blank, blank about President Trump. And if there's 2 disagreeing arguments, it is like a dragon fight, right? It is just, everyone is hostile, everyone's ready to fight. Religion also is a big one. Another big one right now is LGBT topics, right? Somebody says something and you're like, oh, no, 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 and we're already on debate team 2.0. But listening is very effective. I remember one time, I forget if I was in middle or high school, and this wasn't like the first or the only time, but I remember this time, it sticks out to me, where somebody was 100% truly listening to me. They weren't like kind of listening to me while looking at something else, or they weren't listening to me while they were on their phone. Their eyes were at me, their ears were pointed at me, not really, because that would be weird, but like their body posture even said like, hey, 100% of my attention is on you right now. And it was weird, it threw me off. It really did, it threw me off, because I was like, oh, I'm just not used to actually, maybe somebody listening all the time. So listening can be very effective. So your question, or your life application question, is simply just silence, or let the floor be theirs. Sometimes if you find yourself chomping at the bit, take a deep breath, calm down, and just let them keep sharing, as long as it's not hostile or endangering to you. Just let them keep talking, let the floor be theirs. Moving on, the last one, and this is, I think, key for a lot of us when we're in spiritual conversations, especially with people that maybe we disagree with. But what wondering is it's us. It's me and you. It's not me versus you. It's me and you, us, not me versus you. Want to paint a picture in your head of kind of what some of these spiritual conversations look like? Imagine this room turns into a big ravine, okay? It's like, I don't know, 20, 30 yards across and like a million miles down, because that's really realistic, okay? And on one side of these spiritual, that's really far. You'd be falling for a long time. Somebody do the math on how long you'd be falling. On one side, you have questions of this spiritual conversation ravine. And on the other side, you have answers. And I think if you're creating effective Godspace, right, and you're applying the listening, you're applying the heart, you're applying the serve, you're applying all that, I think what it would look like is you and the other person you're talking to on one side of this ravine, kind of building a bridge together to get to the answers. Okay? You lay a plank, I lay a plank, we're laying the base together, we're hitting the nails, and we're doing it together. Oftentimes, what I think these spiritual conversations look like when we're not God-spacing it, is you got them on the question side, and you got you on the answer side. And you're over there, and you're like, you're doing it wrong, do this, do that. Oh my gosh, do I need to get over there? You're so dumb, right? I think that's kind of what these conversations can look like when we are not applying Godspace, when we're not operating out of love or listening to them. And I will tell you, if your spiritual conversation looks anything like that example I just gave you, the bad one, that's going to be the only conversation you're ever going to have with that person. They are not going to be like, man, that was so fun, I want to do that again. It is us, it is not me versus you. I want to encourage you guys that it's not like that they're on a journey and you're just waiting for them to be done with their journey. We're all on this journey together. They're on a journey to kind of explore the curiosities of what these conversations may lead to. You are on a journey as well, to possibly understand them more, or to understand some of those big questions yourself even more. My last point here, just the last few minutes before we wrap up, is that our wondering should point to and reflect the heart of God. Our wondering, our spiritual conversation should always 100% point to, direct, and reflect the heart of God. Because if they're not reflecting God, who are they most likely reflecting? Us. And that's not a good alternative. That's not like, oh, that's fine, that'll do. And there's this passage in John that I want to read through, because I think this says it all. This is a very powerful passage to me. It's from John 13, if you have your Bibles. If you don't, you can totally listen. I think it's up on the screen, I forget. But it's talking about this idea of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. Now, if you're not familiar with the act of washing someone's feet, what it was is a very humble service to show someone, hey, I am here to serve you. And I'm not talking like washing someone's feet like, hey, take off your nice shoes, take off your nice socks. Okay, there's a little BO. I'm okay with that. No, we're talking Bible times feet. So we're talking people, if they were lucky, had sandals or probably their bare feet. So they are walking through, as you can imagine, dirt, if they're lucky, mud, animal fecal matter, probably human fecal matter, right? Trash, probably like dead animal. I mean, you name it, and there's probably some sort of remnant that people were walking through. So now you think Jesus washing his disciples' feet, you're like, oh, that is gnarly. He must really care about those people. And he did. So he's washing, like Jesus, the Savior of the universe, the Son of God, is washing these dudes' feet. And that's where we pick up in John 13, verse 12. After washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet as well. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. Verse 16, I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. So what I want to kind of leave you with tonight, guys, is that luckily we as believers, we have the perfect example set before us, and that's Jesus. And I want us to apply how Jesus interacts with us, how we would go and interact with what I would call maybe those difficult people, those people that we disagree with. Because when I think of difficult people, the first person I think of is me. Right? I can be one of the most, you can ask Rachel, she'll agree, I am a very difficult person. I think we all can be these difficult people. So when you kind of are thinking about, man, how am I going to interact with so-and-so, a person you disagree with, look no further than the example that was set for us. Because here's the deal. When I'm difficult with God, how does He respond to me? He loves me, right? He cares for me. When I'm hurt or I'm whining or I'm wanting to just yell and cry and scream, what is He doing? He is listening to me. He's healing me, like He is serving me. But then here's the one that blows my mind. When I sin or have transgressions towards God, like my acts deliberately are sins and attacks towards God, what was His response to me? His response was Jesus. His response to my sin is, okay, what am I going to do to that? He wasn't like, how dare you, curse you. No, He sent His Son to pay the price for my sins, for my transgressions. So that's the example that we have as we go out into the world and we interact with these, what we may call difficult people. So I want to encourage us in groups tonight, like what does that look like? If I'm in a conversation with somebody, how is my conversation going to look the next time I have this conversation with them compared to the last one? Am I going to follow the example of Jesus in this conversation? Pray with me. Father God, we thank you so much for we thank you for Jesus. We thank you for just the freedom that we have in Him, God. And God, we just thank you for the freedom just to be here. Lord, I ask that as we go into groups, we are just able to encourage each other as we hopefully find ourselves in these conversations with people that may have just a very different view on life than we do. I ask that you are with us in those conversations and that we are just reflecting your love. We thank you and love you.